Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another round of the Sim Racing Collective PC GT3 Series here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. My name is Zach Sweeney, and I haven't got Kelsey Gill alongside me in the commentary booth today. I've got the one, the only, the man from Birmingham himself. Of course, it's Nathan Richards here in the commentary booth with me. Kieran Sharp, as always, behind the scenes, pushing the buttons and making the broadcast look as pretty as ever. We're approaching the halfway point in the 6-round season. We're here for round number 3, and of course, you can see we take to a very soaked second to Spa-Francorchamps, and well, 15 minutes in quali. Nathan, welcome in, of course, the first time that you've taken to the Sim Racing Collective GT3 side of things. Looking forward to it. I mean, well, a bit of a throw into the deep end as such, wet Spa.
Yeah, well, I think GT3s are always great, but with it being in, in the wet and of course being at Spa, which is one of the most iconic tracks, I think this is, going to be a very brilliant evening. Obviously, the race as well could be a little bit wet, so we could see even more shenanigans. We've got someone already off track and hitting the wall, which is far from ideal.
No, definitely not. But thankfully, you've got quite a while in qualifying to get these laps in. Bit of an update in terms of the championship standings. Of course, we've had rounds 1 and 2 that took to Paul Ricard and, of course, Kyle Army that we saw over the course of last week. As it stands in the pros, it's Damien Konchik that leads the way ahead of Dominic Eligna. However, drop scores are applied round by round. So essentially, Konchik keeps his win for round 1, Alina keeps his win from round 2, and they both drop their other respective scores. So essentially they're tied, but Konchik has got a fast lap point, which sees him 1 point ahead of Aligna on 31 to 30. Hislop rounds off the top 3, and Samuel Chumley just in behind in 4th. When it comes to the silvers, it's Elias Troy in a similar situation essentially to the pros, ahead of Jeremy Urison, 31 to 30 respectively. Jakub Gromovski rounds off the top 3 ahead of James Wright and Sasha Pal at the top 5. And then, of course, when it comes to the AMs, a very similar, once again, cookie cutter situation. Patricio Gamea and Giuseppe Zampieri, the two Nordes Racing Team drivers 1 and 2, ahead of Antonio Presici, Leonardo Chiala, and Marcus Miller, the top 5 in that respective championship. But of course, with it being such a short and sweet championship as such, Nathan, only 6 rounds, it means that you really have to maximise each and every point from round 1. You don't have the longevity of the season to rely on.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to be on it all the time. You've got to be getting those good qualifying results and also the good race results. If you don't do that and you miss one race, or you maybe, underperform in one race, yes, you've got your drop result, but apart from that, you've got nothing else to rely on. So then, with the consistency, some of the pro drivers in here, you're going to really struggle to, to bounce back and get back on top. So a lot of it, I think, is sometimes more about consistency than pure pace. You can get second all the way through and win, even though the guys won 3 rounds in the first part, because then they have a couple of bad results and that it just drops it for them.
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to this round in particular, this is going to be a big turning point in the championship. As I say, it's round 3 of 6, so we do sort of tip away into the second half of the season next week. So it should be a ton of fun by the time we head to there. So, of course, we went to Paul Ricard, Kyle Army, and Spa the first 3. We go to Silverstone for our reversed grid format, the altered sort of sprint round as such for round 4, Bathurst and the Nürburgring to round off the 6th round championship that we've got, of course, for season 7. This qualifying session, though, Nathan, poses its own respective challenge. Only 15 minutes, and with Spa being such a long circuit, those 15 minutes, I mean, I know earlier I said you've got quite a bit of time, but thinking back on it, you've got just over 7 kilometers worth of track. That's a lot of ground to cover if you have to do an out lap, a flying lap, and an in lap. By the time you've done that one cycle worth of qualifying laps, you've lost a good half the session.
Indeed, and with it being wet, it poses more issues. So I think, you've kind of got to be on it on these first runs. Don't, obviously in some cases you can maybe do the first run, be a little bit, more slower and just try and get yourself into it. But here you've got to be on it straight away. You haven't got as much time as you would around other circuits. So obviously we'll see these first lap times come through, and I really don't think we'll see much changes towards the end, depending on how the weather goes. If the weather stays like this, I can probably see some of these first runs being the final runs of these drivers, because one mistake as well can end your session with only 2 or 3 respective runs. It doesn't give you much to work with.
No, so I think the best bet is to just fuel up and do lap after lap, purely because obviously you eliminate a lot of the bedding in processes, the slowing down processes, and of course with it being wet, you want to make sure you are out on track for as much of this session as possible. By the looks of it, it stopped raining, so the only water out on circuit is the standing water as such. You can see in the top right, the weather is only overcast, but the standing water is still there. So it's going to be improving. Obviously, these drivers on what we can presume to be the wet compound tyres will be displacing the water, moving it out of the way, forming this dry line on the racing line as such, which means as the session goes on, if you're out on track at the perfect time, you could hit that sort of biting point, that optimal point of track temp and track condition, where if you're stuck in the pit lane doing an outlap and just mistime your run, you could disastrously miss out on qualifying, because that transition from wet to dry, you can find tenths, seconds of a second from one lap alone.
Yeah, indeed, and I think with it, also drawing it quickly, there's quite a big grid spread, so this is where we'll see some people, have lap time separating each other by over a second and a half, and if you make one mistake, even though it's going to a dry track, that could be done for the session. We can see that, for example, Gromowski in P8, 3.5 seconds off. If it dries up now and he can't improve on his run, that will be him probably at the back of the grid. So, on these drying tracks, you've also got to be keeping up with the pace of the circuit as well as the other drivers.
I mean, of course, but then again, sort of nailing the conditions can almost compensate for, don't necessarily want to say a lack of talent, but maybe a lack of talent in the form of a driver. If you're 5 tenths off the pace on pure lap time, but you time the circuit right to find a second because of the conditions, well, then you're going to be a positive 5 tenths relative to your rivals. When it comes to track position for the race, though, they do get 40 minutes. It all depends as to what the weather's going to be, of course, for the race, whether it's wet or dry or whatever. But track position here at Spa, what do we make of it? I mean, does qualifying matter that much?
Well, I think in a grid with 21 cars, it does. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to work your way up, especially when these cars, they're quite big cars. It's quite hard to force them move past. So, I think, yeah, you need to be kind of, if you want to finish in the top 10, you need to be starting in the top 10. Otherwise, you're going to have a big struggle. Those who are clear of the field, like Konchik and Ligner, they can probably start a little bit further back. But those who aren't always on that pace, they really can't afford to be lower down. They need to get a decent qualifying lapping, because it's easier to defend than it is to attack around this circuit.
I mean, yeah, as long as you're sort of quick in the right places as such. I know that sounds sort of obvious to say. What I mean by that is you're fast going in and you're fast coming out. Mid-corner doesn't really matter. No one gives a Scooby about mid-corner pace, because no one's actually getting a move done at the apex. They're doing it under brakes or under acceleration. So as long as you're decent in those two areas, you'll be absolutely fine. So park the bus, make sure you're either maximizing your exit or hindering the exit of the driver behind. And it's fairly simple to defend. But the big problem, well, not necessarily problem with Spa as such, is that 2-kilometer run, of course, from La Source down to, up, I should say, very much up to Les Combes through the Camel Straight. It's so easy to get caught in a slipstream fest and be sort of caught off guard by that slingshot effect. So it's all about positioning your car and timing the moves as best you can.
Indeed, and with it being a long straight as well, you need to make sure you're not moving over at the wrong time, because if you do so, it could end up with quite a few cars in the wall, obviously all going down towards Les Combes. You have your train of 20 cars, you can have many going 2-3 wide. So you need to also make sure you've got quite high awareness of the drivers behind and ahead, and also to the side of you. And obviously, in qualifying, you also need to be aware as well, as we can see many drivers going through their laps now and kind of being stuck behind others, and sometimes it's a hindrance if you're a little bit faster than the one ahead. If not, it's not much of an issue. But this usually still have that dirty air, and also some of that, obviously that water coming off the cars ahead, splashing towards your car. So you've got to make sure as well you can get yourself aware and down the track right time in the qualifying session.
Of which we have about just over 6 minutes left to go of this session, which is probably going to equate to about 3 laps as such. Good thing about ACC is if you cross the line before the checker flag is waved, you do get to finish your lap, unlike other sims, where as soon as the time is 6-0, session's done, unlucky sunshine. So at least you have got that little bit of leniency with ACC that not necessarily extends the session as such, but allows you that opportunity to finish your lap, especially when you time it to perfection. I mean, in conditions like this, the best time to cross the line is going to be with 1 second to go. Yeah,
definitely, because even if the track's dry, it's still going to be improving as it goes on. Obviously, it's still going to be a little bit cold, and you want to get yourself some heat into it. So yeah, I think the last one across the line probably within reason will be the quickest, or at least quickest in their class. So I think yeah, a lot of it is down to that final one. You can see at the top already, Ligner's got a 1 second gap. If the session was dry the whole time, that's going to be hard to overcome. But with the session constantly changing, that could drop him down possibly to around P10 or even lower, because the track is constantly getting better. So that's why Ligner needs to make sure he's going out at the right times. We can see some cars heading back to the pits and going to be looking to go out again to try and time it so they can get their lap done at the exact right time they need to.
Exactly. And also timing the tyres as such, as Hislop and Troy moving way up into second and third respectively. So of course you can see that, as I said, the track condition on the top right is wet. That'll go from wet to greasy to green Of course, when it gets to greasy, it's kind of dry, kind of wet, so maybe you can get away with slick tyres. When it goes to green, absolutely you need to be on slicks. If it does get to that point where it transitions, if you're out on circuit, you're not really going to have much of an opportunity to change tyres as such. If you're in the pit lane, you can quickly whack on a different set of tyres, maybe make it for a fast lap, and then potentially gain bucket loads of lap time. So it sort of ebbs and flows as such. There are pros to being out on track for the entire session. There are pros to trying to be the hero and time the session right. It all depends on essentially how much you've got to lose.
Yeah, a lot of it is all down to timing, and I think that's something that's quite difficult when it's a temperamental session. It's always changing. You can't really predict it, but you've got to just kind of go with gut instincts. And obviously, some of these drivers might have engineers that'll be helping them, or the teammates they might drive with. So you sometimes can get yourself a second opinion on what the best thing to do is in the session. And I'm not a driver, I'm not quick, so I don't think I have any rights to say what is the best thing to do right now. But I think all drivers are trying different things, and you can see they're all doing different strategies. And so far, quite a few, it's working well. Others a little bit further down, it's not, but they've still got another 3 minutes. They've still got time to get out and get an out lap and then go for that final push lap before we're heading towards the 40-minute race.
Yes, and I did want to just touch up on sort of car choice as such. I was going to touch on the fact that obviously with GT3s, it's not a spec series. There are different manufacturers, different engines, different engine placements, obviously weight distribution, things like that. But in a wet session that's incredibly changeable with 3 different classes of drivers, we have got 5 different manufacturers, of course, of Audi, BMW, McLaren, Porsche, and Ferrari, making up the top 5, which goes to show that it doesn't necessarily matter as to what car you're in, because we've seen that all of them have got the capacity to be successful.
Indeed, I think a lot of it in a wet session is down to pace. We see it in real life in many different sports categories. It's not just down to the to the machine you got. It's down to how you can use the machines. We can see a few more cars coming through. I think going in towards a race, if it stays dry, that's when the car will matter more. Obviously, each car's got its own advantages and disadvantages. But if you've got a wet race, I think it's more just down to the driver, and we've seen that in GT3 and Formula 1, it's always down to the driver in those wet conditions.
Very much is. At the end of the day, you're the one driving the machine, and you're the one that can make the most difference. Aligna leading the way in qualifying, 25.727, as we approach probably the penultimate laps of the session, of course, that will set the grid for 40 minutes of racing action. Mikhail Glanovsky, the Garage 59 entry, of course, the pole of Midas Racing that joined us, of course, last week when we went to Kyalami, was cheering on the 2 Ovskis, of course, of Gromovsky and Glanovsky, both of whom are running really, really nicely, both of whom are inside the top 10. But let's see who's going to be the one to top the session, because in a normal session, we'd say 7/10 of a second. That's quite a lot. But in a wet session like this, Troyer, if he nails, say, the Lecombe chicane, he's gained that just that easily. All he has to do then is keep the rest of the lap under wraps, and he should be able to make, sort of 3, 4, 5, the gap for pole, just like that, as is the magic of changeable sessions.
Indeed, and the fact the top 18 separated by 6 seconds does prove that you can gain, maybe a second or maybe half a second in one single corner, and that's where we'll see, kind of the pro drivers from the silver drivers. We'll see that difference because, some of these pro drivers, some of those at the top, they can work with the wetter session better. They can find that time that other drivers might not be able to find. They might just have to rely on getting the lap done. Whereas these pro drivers, they can, they can find 3/4 of a second in one corner by taking a slightly different line, or maybe applying the throttle a little bit later, which some of the other drivers don't really have the capabilities to do. And with it being Spa as well, I think that's where we'll see as well. The grid probably be a little bit more close in the sense of you don't just see Spa on ACC, you see everywhere. Everyone drives Spa. Every single game, every single car, pretty much. So that's also where we see some experience. They know how to drive Spa, especially in the wet.
They do. Damien Konchik, of course, championship leader, fielding one of the best liveries I've ever seen on a Ferrari, I've got to be honest. I absolutely adore that. Could use a bit more red, but the black into, I think that's purple. I don't want to commit, but I'm going to go with purple. Of course, looks absolutely amazing on that Ferrari 296, and of course the lap times are there to prove it. He crossed the line with about 20 seconds left to go. Not at all bad, of course, as we're towards the tail end of the session. Here's Hislop as well, 1.3 off Aligna, who of course on his seasonal debut, season 2, round 6 when we came to the circuit of Spa-Francorchamps, was a wet race then. He nailed the conditions in that Audi R8 and he won his first ever race of the TSRC PC GT3 Series on that day. I'm intrigued if he's going to be keen to replicate that success.
And we'll certainly see, as we can see a few more cars coming through. Obviously, there his lot crossed the line for the final time. Couldn't get to it before the checkered flag hit, so he's going to be done there. So we might see a few more improvements, drop him down, but I can't see him going down much more here in this session. The key thing now is to kind of keep our eyes on Konchik and Aligna to see what they can extract. Obviously, the gap between those two is 1.3 seconds between probably two of the quickest drivers in here. It's quite a big gap, but then again, it depends what they can find in these wet conditions. Obviously, loads of people finding more time and more time, but it's down to that, obviously that final lap to see what you can achieve.
This is the do or die of the session. The best, of course, track conditions that we're going to see. Very little in the form of standing water. Troy, I have to say, for obviously for a silver driver as such, that middle class between the pros and the abs, big snap of oversteer from Mav Gardner. Well held through Paul, and it must be said in that BMW. But to be only about 7 tenths of a pole, second place on the front row, that is a Ferrari facing the wrong way multiple times. He's doing a phenomenal job, is Troy, up there on the front row as it stands. Alex Nieto moves his way up into 11th place, narrowly missing out on the top 10. But for the most part, I mean, we've got little groups of cars that are actually fairly close, sort of considering it's a 2.5-minute lap time here at a wet Spa. I mean, look at that. Hislop to Konchik, Konchik to Powell, Gromovsky and Glanovsky not really separated by too much either. Yeah, the whole field is spread by quite a bit, but there are certain patches that people are really close.
Indeed, nothing that show, it's going to show well for a race, isn't it? Like, depending if it goes dry or stays wet. I think we could definitely have quite a decent race on our hands. Obviously, with the strategies as well, you need to pick. You might do for an undercut, might go for an undercut. It depends, and then that's also where we could see the differences in position, not pace, but strategy. With everyone being so close together, if you find half a second in pitting one lap earlier, that could be used to securing 3 or 4 positions over where he was before. As we can see, Konchik come through. We'll see if he can find a decent improvement on his lap. If he can at all, obviously he was in the best conditions, and I think he moved up into P2 there, just 30,000 separating the top 2. And Zach, I think you've proved your point. The grid is very close.
Very much so. So Konchik proving that even though he was on the back foot for the majority of this session, found that time late on to put himself onto the front row directly alongside his championship rival. They're a winner piece in terms of the counted scores. There are the final results. It's Aligna from Konchik, the front row. That's going to be a very, very spicy one indeed. An all-silver second row, of course, for Lars Troy and Sasha Pal, 3 and 4. Then comes Josh Hislop, and then Gromovsky and Glanovsky, 6 and 7. Of course, James Wright will keep the pole company on row 4 ahead of Urison and Luca Raya that round off the top 10. Alex Nieto in P11 ahead of Ryan Blanchet in 12th. Then comes Gardner and Hess on row 7. Kazemkanov in P15 ahead of Giuseppe Zampieri just behind, keeping him company on row number 8. Patricio Gameo, Bandera, Miller and Parry, the top 20 ahead of Paolo Cisco in P21, and the final place, of course, on this grid. A couple of minutes before we get ourselves underway for the formation lap, and Nathan, I think we're set up for an absolute cracker of a race.
We are. I think, Spa, it delivers quite well every single time with it being a wet circuit, or, well, we presume it's going to be a wet circuit. I think it makes the start a little bit more interesting because obviously the drivers don't really know, what the conditions are going to be like. They don't know fully when to brake and when to get on throttle, so that could make the first few laps a little bit of a testing stage in a way. They need to figure out what the conditions are before sending moves in towards corners, otherwise it could end in another carnage. And in a championship like this, you can't afford to send moves end up being in a wall. You've got to, you've got to keep yourself comfortable in these first opening laps. Obviously, with it being 40 minutes as well, it's generally quite a long race. You'll get a good 20 laps out of this, so you're going to go around quite a few times. Don't send stupid moves in the first lap. At least wait a little bit and go for it when it's a little bit more comfortable.
Settle into the race as such, but remember, you have got a drop score for the round, for the season as such. So I know we touched on the fact that consistency is key in such a short championship, but you do have that round that you can fall back on. The likes of Konchik and Aligna, of course, with a second and a third place, that is their lowest score. That is, if they finish 7th, that race, effectively, they finish second as such, kind of, because obviously they route off the 7th and get the second back. So they can almost kind of afford to take a little bit more risk, especially because they're on the front row together.
Yeah, indeed. And I think those who obviously been at the top, they need to make sure they're being more careful than others. And also, those behind, they've also got to be careful. The last thing they want to do is take out, a championship protagonist. That it's going to look bad on them. And also, it sometimes makes the drivers feel a bit meh because they've taken out, they're taking out someone who's in a big battle. So I think that's also something those behind need to be a little bit wary about. But going into it, I think it's one of those where pretty much anyone can win. With Spa being such a technical circuit, you make one mistake and that is your race over. And still, it seems that the track is quite wet.
Certainly so. Yeah, absolutely. looks like, of course, looking at the forecast, it is going to begin to dry up as the race progresses. Will it be enough to dry up and take them to slicks? Remember, they only have a 20-minute pit window. So if it gets to 10 minutes to go and the track hasn't dried up, they still have to come in. But then they might get unlucky and then sort of essentially maybe 2 minutes later, it then dries up, they have to come in once again. And here at Spa and ACC, it is a long, grueling drive through the pit lane. You do the Grand Prix, then you do the endurance, and you get spat out at the top of the hill here at Eau Rouge and Raidillon. So the aim of the game really is to minimize how long you're spending in the pit lane, which isn't easy when the conditions could be changeable.
Yeah, indeed. The pit lane around here, I always say it's quite a bit of a stupid pit lane. It is ridiculously long, which, you know, it's not ideal. You lose a lot more time here than you would in many other, you know, around many other circuits. But obviously going down the Kemmel Straight into towards Lacombe, that's also where we'll see drivers looking for moves. But obviously on that first lap, you don't know where the best point is to brake. You don't know where the best grip is. So that's why drivers, I think, on this first lap should not be going for moves in Lacombe unless you're completely ahead of the car going in towards it. So I think that's something the drivers are going to be aware of, especially at the top, to obviously being Ligner and Konchik. They need to make sure they're being extra careful in these conditions. And also, Zach, it's great to see so many different, you know, manufacturers here in the top 10 on the grid. I think, what is it, 5 manufacturers in the top 10.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see, obviously, a tribute to the balance of performance here on ACC. They do a great job of keeping the cars nice and level. But even then, the cars are going to have their quirks and their characteristics as such. I mean, the Audi R8 for me has always been quite a pointy car, same with the Porsche. In contrast, the Ferrari, at least when it was the 488 GT3 as opposed to the 296, was always very stable and user-friendly. So yes, over the course of a lap, they might be equal. They do have their own sort of characteristics that you can exploit, and it's always about choosing the car that you feel most comfortable in, not necessarily the one that's the meta as such. And of course, things are going to change from track to track, but it seems here at Spa, even in the changeable conditions, things are incredibly close. We're about halfway through the formation lap. Let's talk about the mentality, obviously, of these drivers. Konchik has a championship lead to defend. He knows, in the wet, based off qualifying, Ligner is absolutely rapid. What is he going to be thinking at the start of this race?
Well, I think he needs to first of all, you know, kind of work out how quick is Ligner in race pace. If he's really quick, just stay behind and just try and get yourself a second place. But if you know you've got that edge, you can get a couple of tenths a lap, go for it, try and gain in. So I think, you know, that's what he's be careful of. He's got to play that mental game as well of trying to put some pressure on the back of the German if he can, obviously, on these opening laps. If you can't do so, don't bother fighting for it too hard. You don't want to lose yourself a second place or a podium.
And at the end of the day, do you settle in a championship fight? I mean, obviously, if Konchik, if it gets to a point where Ligner is gone, at what point is the point of no return for him?
Oh, it's hard to tell, isn't it? I think it depends on driver to driver. Some drivers like to, you know, be going for the whole way. Some of them like to take more of a bit of a relaxed approach to it and just seeing what happens. So I think it's all down to what he wants to do, but I don't really know, to be fair. I think it just depends on what Konchik decides.
Absolutely, and how much brutality he wants to send it. Again, good point brought up in the YouTube chat in regards to the drop score that we touched on. Maybe it's just a time for him to absolutely go for it, and if it goes right, it goes right. If it goes wrong, he's got a second place, which, by the way, is still higher than a Ligner to drop in, to sort of substitute back in. So he is looking very, very pretty. Before we get going, though, Nathan, who's coming out on top after round 3?
Ooh, I'll go with Konchik. I like the Ferrari. I don't like the Audi. I don't think it's a very nice car. The livery's nice, but I don't like the car. So I'm going to go with the Ferrari-powered, Konchik for the win.
Wow. There we go. Nathan Richards basing, of course, his judgment on the winner based on the car that they drive. That is controversial, I'm sure. I love the Ferrari 296, but I've got absolutely no bias. These are two fantastic drivers, so I'm going to sit on the fence and not say anything. Of course, they are lining up 2 by 2, but we don't take to the start here at the pit straight. We do it at the endurance, sort of that run into Eau Rouge and Raidillon. That's when the 40 minutes will start this race. Ligner ahead of Konchik. The green flag will wave, of course, when they run through Les Sources, and that is going to be a sort of a very important time for Ligner to punch his foot to the floor. Of course, you can see making a very slow drive up to Les Source, and then of course that run into Eau Rouge, where he's going to have to hold firm. And of course he's the one leading the way in these treacherous conditions, but he's going to have to be the first one to battle the sort of Eau Rouge, the lack of grip, and that is of course going to be an adaptation that he's going to have to make on the fly, whereas those behind him are going to be able to sort of use him as a reference. Round number 3 though of the Sim Racing Collective PC GT3 Series here, a very soaked circuit of Spa-Francorchamps. The 2 championship leaders make up the front row. We ride away towards the start-finish line. The green flag will wave. 40 minutes on the clock, a mandatory pit stop, and maybe some changeable conditions in the mix as well. 21 cars on the field. The Audi R8 will send us flying once again with green flag running for the TSRC, and immediately tucking into tow is Konchik. He doesn't go for the move into Eau Rouge and Radion. Eligna's able to lead, but up over the crest here at Radion, it's going to be all about slipstream as they run their way up the Camel Straight. Can Eligna defend?
You can see as they head down towards Laycombe, you can see already Konchik to the right-hand side as they head down in towards the chicane. He's a little bit ahead as they head in towards the break zone. Who will be ahead, though, as they head in towards the chicane? You can see a few cars are behind as well, all looking to make it side by side. And I think for a little bit there, Konchik went deep, and they still travel side by side as they head down in towards Malmedy. And I think, yeah, Eligna's got it back, and you can see the Eddie there a little bit more stable through those opening corners.
And now having to go defensive once again into Ravage. It's off camber, though, so that outside line for Konchik is going to be very, very difficult. Also doesn't want to leave himself open on the inside, of course, for the likes of Elias Troyer and Sasha Pal to get involved. They are separate points for the individual classes, but there is still the overall championship to be aware of. So the likes of Troyer and Pal are still fighting for points in the overall, but at the end of the day, their main focus has to be their respective classes. Nieto, I think, not getting off to the best of starts, maybe running side by side through P1. Konchik really eager to put some pressure on Eligna early on.
As they go in towards the next chicane, you can see looking to close on the back of the Audi. Gets a decent run, but just gets cut off there by Eligna as they come through in towards the next section at Stello. Of course, you can see the Audi looks a little bit more stronger in the corners, and obviously Konchik looks a bit stronger in the straights, but that is a difference between the 2 cars. Some will be stronger in the corners, some will be stronger on the straights. So they head through now in towards Curve de Paul Fred. You can see as well Troyer with a really good start in the Porsche, looking to try and get his foot down early and try and get a move for second place if he can do, because he's closing really quickly on the back of Konchik as they head down towards the bus stop chicane.
Yeah, of course, they've got Blanchard on first. The front-mounted flat 6 in that Porsche gives great front-end grip. So, of course, that's going to be very ideal in understeery conditions such as these changeable wet conditions. It's all about having as much weight on the front end as possible, and that Porsche does it really, really well. And, of course, at the wheel, or the hands of Elias Troyer, I should say, at the wheel, that Porsche is going to thrive, I'm sure. It all depends as to how well he can stay with the likes of Eligna and Konchik. As you can see here, James Wright on the back of Josh Hislop, the BMW defensive to turn 1.
Indeed, you can see them go side by side, and the McLaren, they're looking to slow down, get a bit of a switch back if they can on the exit of the corner, but you can see that the BMW moving over nicely to cover off the move on the exit of the first corner down at the source, and they head back up towards Eau Rouge and Radion. Yet again, you can see obviously no one really close to make it side by side up there. They just want to keep it single file, and also in these wet conditions with that dirty air, be very careful to take it flat through here. It's very easy to make a big mistake, especially when the car just has a massive snap, as you can see there. The Mercedes of Rye going a little bit wide as they head up the hill now, heading down in towards Laycombe. And the good thing is, Zach, here, that the slipstream is quite strong around this circuit. I mean, if you're a little bit behind, you can get yourself a nice decent run in towards that high-speed chicane.
You really can. Here's Ryan Blanchett looking to the right-hand side of Glenofsky. It's always risky going offline in these wet conditions because, of course, the dry line is the one that's being dispersed, getting rid of the water, the one that's got all the rubber laid down, and the one that's got the grip. If you go off that, you are getting a full dosage of wetness, which might be fine for some, but of course for overtaking here at Spa, that's certainly not ideal. 36 minutes still left to go in this race, and still incredibly close at the front of the field. Still no movements, though. It seems that in typical wet race fashion, once things have settled down, it really is single file.
It is, because when everyone's spread them by half a second or by a second, there's no point going for moves. There's no point trying to push in. You might sort of sit in the position you are, unless you're a little bit further back, you've got less loose, then you can go for it. But if you're in the top 5 and the gaps what there are already over a second, there's no point pushing to make moves just yet. Wait till that pit stop comes. Wait till a little bit further in with some cars. Obviously, I know the McLaren itself struggles quite a lot when it comes to that tyre wear. So, if you're the likes of a Beamer who's a little bit behind, you can wait a little bit, and then once those tyres start to die a bit more, you can then go and launch an attack. If you can, also obviously depending on pace, and also dependent on what the weather could do. Some drivers hate the wet, some drivers love it. So obviously, if it goes towards the dry conditions, if you're a bit more comfortable in that, that's when you can then try and launch an attack. Also, as you can see though at the top though, Kojic and Lignap not really focusing on gaining on each other, just sticking together and just trying to pull away if they can from Try, who's now got a 1.5-second gap to that Porsche. Strong at the start, but now starting to back off from the top two.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. Obviously, the longevity of these 40-minute races. Still, in sort of retrospect, sprint races as such, but there is still an element of longevity, thinking long-term, and consistency will reign supreme, especially as we touched on changeable conditions like this. The track now deemed damp, so not soaked, not wet like we saw earlier, damp. So it is beginning to dry up there, getting rid of more water than's being put down, and that forecast as well shows overcast in the near future. Josh Hislop all over the rear end of Gromowski in that McLaren through turn number 1. Of course, it's all about the exit here, but that tells me that we're on the horizon for what could well be maybe that gamble for slicks.
The gamble's there, but then again in the next 30 minutes, it starts to go wet again. So what do you do? It's such a weird situation. You don't know what to do, and that's when you've just got to make the gamble and see if it works. Some drivers will make it work heavily, otherwise you're at the other end of the scale. So, you know, I think it's more down to just a bit of luck and a bit of having a gamble than it is actual skill and know what to do with the strategies. We can see there a few cars having a battle. That'll be Glanowski there as they head down in towards Lacombe, looking to try and send a move right if you can around the outside. And obviously, you know, he's got it done. I think the Merc there, Ryan, just backed off. I don't think he really wanted to send it too close.
I don't think so. And again, it comes down to how much risk do you want to take going offline here, especially more so as the track begins to change. That drier line, I should say, going to be more prominent, and the offline, the wetter line, definitely as well, going to be too big of an extreme. And again, it doesn't really take much. While these cars do have ABS and traction control, they're not miracle workers. You will still go sliding into the side of someone if you aren't careful. Saw Glanowski there getting a dosage of the curb on the exit of No Name, and again getting a healthy dosage of oversteer. So it can still happen even if you have got the assistance of traction control and ABS. The car still, you still have to control it and have good car control. You know, especially a difficult circuit like Spa in difficult conditions like these ones. Josh Hislop still on the back of Gromowski, definitely driving better than the McLaren. You can see he's, you know, more decisive, more precise in his movements. Just can't find the gap to get past.
Indeed, and that's an issue he will find along with many others on the circuit. If they can't find a move through, they're going to be losing noodles of time. So those ahead, and you know, obviously now being what, nearly 6-7 seconds off the lead, that could really harm Hislop's chance of a podium, or even, you know, trying to fight for that victory, which obviously he needs. He wants to get himself higher up in the championship. So yeah, he's got a lot of work to do, and I think the key thing he needs to do is just find a gap, get past Gromowski as quick as he can. Don't mess around, don't go for silly switchbacks, just go for the move when it presents itself. So we can see Gardner looking to close in on the back of another BMW of Urison as they heading towards the bus stop chicane. We'll see what he can do if he goes around the right, round the long way round in towards chicane. Has the inside as they head back through, and obviously, you know, the thing is with these two, they've got the same car. It's all down to the driver, not the vehicle here with these two here.
Of course, there are slight adjustments that can be made setup-wise, but fundamentally, yeah, these are the two identical cars. So it all comes down to who can be the braver one on the brakes, who can be more decisive in the conditions. Outside line for Gardner. It's all about being able to put your foot down, though, and also, I know we touched on, obviously, traction control and stuff. It's also minimizing how much effort that traction control does, because as soon as it kicks in, you're losing engine power. So making sure you're on that fine limit to get the maximum engine power off the exit of a corner so you can get up to speed as soon as possible. Making sure you don't exceed the track limits at the top of the hill here at Radion. So again, minimizing your track limits, because you only get 3 chances. You get the penalty on the 4th. That's something these guys want to avoid. Matt Gardner, though, looking to the right-hand side into Lacombe. Is he going to move his way up into the top 10? Definitely having a bit of a look. He's going in very, very hot, but gives the space. Bit of contact. Off the road goes the 69 machine.
Oh, and do I think he should have gone off there? Probably not, no. I think they could have still stuck it side by side, but still, it'll be Urison who keeps that position ahead for 10th. And luckily, they're not losing time to those aheaders. I think it'll be, right, yeah, he's not looking too strong on pace. So this is allowing the two Beamers to have a bit of a battle, but also stick with that Mercedes as they head through in towards Speaker's Corner, then down towards Pilm, which I think, to be fair, Zach, I expected more drivers to have troubles in Pilm, with it being such a horrible corner, especially in the dry, you know, in the dry, especially in the wet. I thought we would have saw more people make mistakes and spinning off here.
Yeah, I mean, credit where credit's due to these drivers. It is a fairly stacked grid when it comes to sort of you know, talent and ability. Speaking of Ryan Blanchette, though, making a mess of P1, it's comedic timing as such, and a very unfortunate thing for the Ferrari. Let's take a look as to how it happened. Way too much curb, spent too much time on it. Good drift, and well, until it wasn't.
Well, the commentator's curse. I know you don't believe in it, but I think that has proved it, hasn't
No.
it? Like, come on.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Right. I'm sorry. Ryan Blanchette has just had an absolute massive skill issue. That's not our problem. I'm sorry. Anyway, before we get too caught up on the commentator's curse or the lack thereof, and just bad luck, bad driving, or a bit of both, that's all it is. Mav Gardner is on the back of Urison still in this fight, just in behind the Mercedes of Luca Raya, maybe having a look, but the gap doesn't materialise there at all into, of course, the bus-up chicane. We've still got plenty of time left to go in this race.
Indeed, as you can see them coming out the final corner, and these two are going to be going for it the whole way. You know, they're so equal on pace, and with Raya being in front as well, kind of blocking them off in a way, it also, in some cases, means one of them can't go from here, otherwise they're going to hit back of a Mercedes, which isn't a very, you know, an ideal thing to do at all. But you can see, though, at the front, Aligna's got a 2-second gap, so he's really pulled away from Konchik on these past couple of laps, and as long as he keeps it consistent, I can't see any reason why he'll be under pressure from the Ferrari.
Very much so. And he, again, it's all about just focusing on your driving as best you can, not really worrying about too much behind you. Mav Gardner, though, taking a healthy dosage of track limits at the top of the hill, nearly losing the car because of it. Doesn't gain any track position because of it. No to tell, the three of them. Here comes Urison to the inside of Luca Raya, who does try to deter the move ever so slightly. The BMW, though, caught sort of napping, and here comes Mav Gardner sailing the move around the outside of the racing line. Bit of grip there he's found. Now into Malmedy. Urison stays ahead. Mav Gardner trying to get the up and under as they run their way towards Rivage. The downhill run, of course, late on the brakes. We could well see Mav Gardner. No way through for now. And I have to sort of give Urison respects. He's walking this balance really well between attacking in front and defending behind.
Indeed, he's doing a brilliant job there. Obviously, you know, just trying to... I think the best thing he wants to do is get ahead of Raya. I think the more he's stuck behind him, the more he's going to have Gardner up his rear and looking to make moves. I think he's probably quicker than the three of them there. So I think his main thing is to get ahead of Raya as soon as possible and then try and push, because that gap over 3.2 seconds there to Glanov's Green 8. So, you know, he's losing way more time than he needs to be. And I think easily he's one of the quickest on the circuit. So we need to get through, try and fight for that move as that's coming through. But obviously at the top you can see the gaps are just increasing between first, second, third and fourth. So can I see much battles between them at the moment? Not really, but the pit stops, the changeover, that's where I think we'll see those gaps increase and come down.
And with it being such changeable conditions, how much risk do you take? I mean, obviously we've seen it in real life plenty of times. The biggest one that strikes out to me, obviously, Canada 2011 in Formula 1 with changeable conditions, timing the tyre changes correct. But sort of how do you best go about that? I mean, you can't predict when the track is going to be suitable for slicks or wets. So how do you know what tyre to go on and when?
It's a hard one, isn't it? I think you've got to be kind of looking at how the track's progressing, and you know, if it's not going dry enough, don't go for it. But if the track's progressively getting dry and you can find more and more laps on, then go for the gamble, see if it works. If it doesn't, you've tried it. And you know, hats off to you. As you can see, James Rump into the pits now, and the pit window isn't open for 17 minutes.
Well, it is open now. It will be for the next 17 minutes.
Okay.
As to the inside goes Urison on Mav Gardner, who absolutely launches one. And that's what I'm talking about going offline. So easy to make the mistake, even with the ABS. Not a miracle worker. He finds himself tapping the barrier on the exit of turn number 1 and losing multiple positions as he rejoins the race in P11. I've always said, don't be a hero, because yes, maybe that 10% chance that you get it right is going to make you look like a hero. Go with the track that you've got currently. Don't try and predict what it's going to be in the next 5-10 minutes as such. Right now, I think it might be, I mean, it stopped raining, it's clearing up a little bit. There is beginning to be a dry line start to form. Maybe it is that crossover into slicks. But again, that forecast of potential rain later on. Here comes Josh Hislop to the outside of Rivage, by the way. Once again, really difficult, especially if you sort of touch the wet patch ever so slightly, both of them sliding on the exit. The only problem that I would have with slicks right now, not only obviously a little bit of standing water, but also the fact the track temp is really cold, only at 20 degrees.
Yeah, indeed. I think the best thing to do is follow the crowd. I think we'll see most people obviously going back onto another set of wets here, so do it. Don't go to the 6. It probably won't work. If it does, brilliant. You'll probably come home with a victory or a top 3. But if you don't, it hurts even more because you've lost crucial points. So I think the best thing to do is kind of see what the others do. If the top 5, you can go for the 6, go for it. If they don't, then don't bother. Otherwise, you know, it could definitely harm your race. So I think that's what the drivers have got to focus on here. Obviously, with the pit window being up for the next 15 minutes, they've got to start making decisions soon. They haven't got time to sit and think. They've only got, what, it's that 7-8 laps to kind of make that decision. Do we go in? Do we go for wets, or do we go in for slicks? Obviously, the track is still quite damp. and with it being wet, possibly in the next 30 minutes, is that risk still going to be there?
But again, there's only 25 minutes left of this race, so will it even rain again by the time this race finishes? I mean, right now, if it's leaning towards slicks and it is constantly drying up, I mean, you've got 15 minutes to play with. You're not necessarily in a rush as such. Here comes Dominic Aligna, though, maybe deciding that right now is the best time to come in for slicks, not wanting to stay out too long on the wets. Because, well, yes, if you stay out on the wets and the track dries up and then go for slicks, you could gain from that. But also, you could also do harm in the sense that you burn out your wet tyres, you're constantly searching for water to cool them down, and then you're losing time the longer you stay out waiting for the track to dry up to the point where it's a no-brainer. So at some point, there is always going to be an element of risk. You can never be 100% certain in conditions like this.
Indeed, and I think, you know, with the track getting drier and obviously with it also having the chance of going wetter, that's where that's where we'll see at some point both players being on such a heavy disadvantage. So that's where they've got to, you know, make that decision and be like, right, so we could be, you know, in a bit of trouble near the end, but we could be stronger now, or other way around, you could be stronger now, stronger at the end, but not strong in the middle. So that's where the drivers have got to make those decisions. As we can see, though, it'll be Raya there looking to gain in, or it'll be Hess looking to gain on Raya, I should say, as I head down in towards the next one at Lycomp. Can he get the move done ahead of the Mercedes? Yes, he can. To P5 goes Hess.
Yeah, nice move indeed. But the counter-attack could be there from Luca Raya, of course. This is the fight for P5 overall, P4 in the silver class. There's also Mav Gardner picking his way past, making the most. He was a second back at the start of the sector. Now finds himself ahead of the pair of them with a superb move, getting the up and under through Malmedy. Finds himself to the inside of Ravage and up now into 5th place with some nice clear air ahead of him. Marcel Hess, though, is by no means a slow driver, fielding a very, very nice livery indeed. Luca Raya, though, you can definitely tell, struggling with a lack of grip.
Indeed, we've seen Aligna go in towards a pit, so we'll see what he can do from here. And obviously, Konchik staying it's a little bit longer than the current race. Oh, that's a bit of a slide, and that's Hess. Whew, that's a big save there from the Porsche. Luckily, they're nearly going round, but caught it. He's lost a bit of time, but obviously, if he missed it, he could have, you know, we could have lost a bit more time, and also could have had a bit of damage to go with it. As we can see, obviously, Konchik, when is he going to go in? Because he's got a 14-second gap to Gromowski, because obviously some of those who were ahead and behind of him are now in the pit. So, you know, it's leaving it a little bit more late. So obviously, that can work. It might not. It depends. You know, it just depends on how the track conditions go. But the good thing is, Aligna's not going to worry. He's made that pit stop. That's one less thing that's at the back of his mind now.
Yeah, it's ticked off, but still the gamble is going to be there. Damien Konchik in. We had an interesting point brought up by Andrew Pike in the YouTube chat in regards to the strategy. Obviously, he used to race in this exact championship. While he wasn't very successful, I'm sure he'll agree, he still has that dynamic, that knowledge, that experience as to, you know, how you deal with these different scenarios, and maybe predicted that Aligna was ever so slightly too early with his decision. Will he be hurt or be hindered by that, or will Andrew Pike have gotten it all wrong and Aligna maybe made an absolute worldie? It looks like he is still sliding around a little bit. The gap when Aligna came into Konchik was about 1.82 seconds-ish. So let's see if that overcut for Konchik has worked out to get in that track position, because if he has got it, you can bet your bottom dollar he's not going to give it up without a good old fight.
Oh, definitely. You know, I think they're going to go to all the way to the end if they can have that. But obviously, the gap between Aligna and Konchik before the pit stops was quite a big gap. So obviously, that gap hopefully will come down a little bit. But you have the drivers like Parl and Hess who have stayed there a little bit longer. That could, you know, it could go to their favour depending on what the weather does in the next few minutes. So we'll see what they can do from there. Obviously, we'll see shortly where Konchik comes out to compared to Aligna. Aligna's heading down towards Bonchamont currently, as you can see, just throwing the car into the left-hand side. Got a little bit deep, though. Got a little bit too wide. Obviously, with the track still being a little bit sketchy for him, he's going to have to try and work his way into the tyres as he heads down in towards the bus stop chicane. We'll see where Konchik comes out. But as we know, it's a very long pit lane around this track, so we'll see. But I don't think they're going to be that far away from each other.
He's still stationary, though, as Damien Konchik. Depends where his pit box is. I think it is in the endurance side of things. They do have a mandatory 25-second stop, but obviously with tyres, that is going to be a little bit longer. Track now changed to greasy, which tells me it could well be time to be making that transition onto slicks. Where does Damien Konchik get spat out? It's at the top of the hill here at Radion. Where on earth is Dominic Aligna? There he is, up over the crest. He's obviously going to be at top speed, but pushing way too hard, nearly losing the car, saving it in phenomenal style. But what it does mean is that Damien Konchik, championship leader, takes the net lead of this race.
And the question is the dry tyres the right way to go? Because look at the top, we can see in 10 minutes, it's going to start raining again. So you know, have these drivers made a bit of a mistake? Obviously, those there like Parl and Hess have stayed out longer. They can go pretty much to when that rain is supposedly meant to start, so they can make a decision there and then. These drivers have pitted now. That's it. They might need to go back in again, which would definitely harm their race. So it's still going to be a very interesting ending to see who will come out here on top. On Conti got over a 3-second gap. Aligna, a massive scare, could up the hill towards Rouge and Mayon, still proving that the track is far from ideal conditions.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be, even if you are on the quote-unquote right tyre of the time, you've still got to contend with slippery curbs, cold track temps, changeable conditions. I mean, it's going to change corner by corner, lap by lap at the very least. Sasha Parl, of course, leading this race, yet to pit, as you can tell by that little orange box with a white 1 there. That means they haven't ticked off their mandatory pit stop as of yet, so still out there on the same set of wet compound tyres that he started this race on. Is this the right call, though? I wonder. You can see he's moving offline purposefully to get some standing water onto those tyres. They are going to be starting to heat up a lot. Is he holding out hope for some rain, though? I mean, like I said earlier, surely you have to react to the track as it is now rather than trying to be the hero.
Yeah, indeed. I think, as you say, being the hero is probably not the best thing to do in this championship. Oh, that's close to contact there. I think there might have been a little bit of contact there between, was it Gardner and Dreyer? Still proving that these tyres are a little bit sketchy, and Gardner a little bit too uncomfortable. Luckily, they didn't go rain, but that was very close to contact. If there was a little bit, I think there might have been between the two drivers, but they come out unscathed and can still continue on with the race. And still lots of Parl and Urison still staying out, but obviously Urison having a bit of a mistake earlier on in the race, dropping down to 15 seconds back from pole, which is quite far from the leaders of this race. So he's going to make this gamble work, and if it can save him 5 or 10 seconds. If not, he'll drop back a little bit more than he did before. Obviously, you can see Konchik looking to slowly bring that gap up to Parl, but it's nothing special at the moment. I think we know these drivers are still a little bit sketchy here. Obviously, Ligna closing in that gap now, 1.9 seconds it was over 3. So it seems the area that a little bit quicker so far at this point in the race. Could go flat that time up towards a hill, unlike last time where he ended up nearly into a wall as they head down towards the Lacombe chicane. And I think here, Zach Ligna's looking a lot stronger than the Ferrari of Konchik.
But the advantage that Konchik has got is that track position. Ligna has the reference of Konchik, which is always an advantage in changeable conditions. He can see what Konchik does. Does it work? Doesn't it work? And also he's got that almost weird subconscious instinct of when you're chasing, you drive faster. Whatever the reason is, if you're chasing a car, specifically a rival for the lead, you are going to be going a couple of tenths of a lap quicker potentially, purely because that competitive spirit is almost sort of egging you on, forcing you to find extra time. Yes, Aligna looks quicker now, but how easy of a job is he going to be, is he going to have to get past Damon Konchik? Because remember, it's not like it's, say, Elias Troy leading the way, and it's almost a case of they can give a little bit of leeway because they're not necessarily fighting for anything. This is Konchik versus Aligna. They have gone toe-to-toe for the entire season, and they will do for the rest of the season to come. They're not going to give any leeway whatsoever. This is going to be a battle of the Titans for the final 17 minutes and 38 seconds that we've got. Is Hislop's off at P1.
Ooh, that's not ideal, and he's gone complete onto a bit of a wet patch of the circuit, which also ruins your tyres a little bit more and also loses you some time. But obviously you can see Aligna there gaining in quickly to the back of Konchik, and the only issue that Aligna's got, I think, as well as the fact of trying to get past, is also part of the track is still wet. So he's got to go into that wet line and take a bit of a risk, which is sometimes a little bit too much of a risk, because you can see them heading down in towards the chicane. But look how much more speed that the Eddie's coming through, actually hits the curb and loses some speed, as I say, that he's gaining in as they head down towards the chicane. But yeah, I think Aligna, he's got, what, 17 minutes. He can afford to sit back for now and look for the move when it's only open. I wouldn't say he'd send if he's a little bit further back. If he's close and alongside, go for it. You've got 16 minutes. He is still relatively quite a long way to go for him to try and make some of those positions, but you can see there they're starting to make inroads now on those guys at the top. Obviously they've still got to pit, and then again the track could change again, which then could cause more issues. So it's a weird scenario, isn't it, where sometimes it's not down to the driver's skill, it's down to the driver's luck. You're
always going to have an element of luck when it comes to motor racing. That goes without saying, right? it's how you best use the luck that you've been given, like making the most of a poor mistake from your rival. There's Dominic Ligner now being given this lifeline to potentially get a free position. He's on the racing line, the grippier part of the circuit. Konchik might have to concede here, a fight for what could be the net lead. Here comes Dominic Ligner, the Season 4 champion, going to the outside through Les Combes, but Konchik able to hang on. Goes in a bit too deep though. The double up and under potentially could be here from Dominic Ligner. No way through for now, but definitely could have been a costly mistake.
Indeed, and you can see Konchik obviously breaking later there and making it work, but there'll be some points where he might break a little bit too late, and that could be it done for him. As we can see, though, Ligner looking to try and gain back as they head down in towards Speaker's Corner now at turn number 9. And I think, yeah, you can see he's not really keen on sending a move. He's, you know, obviously you saw him to Lake he backed off a little bit as well going into there. He wasn't keen on just going for a full send because it's not worth it. They're fighting for a championship. You don't want to send stupid moves. You don't want to end it for the both of you because it does also ruin your confidence as well if you're taking your championship rival out or if you're being taken out by your championship rival.
Yeah, it always is a little bit more sour when things go wrong. But again, drop scores to fall back on, and stewards reports to maybe fall back on at a worst case scenario. But if you get taken out and DNF and your rival gets a 5-second penalty for the incident, then you're not exactly going to be jumping for joy as such. But Konchik maybe going back onto wets as such for that second stop, maybe due to the discrepancy, obviously, or the pace that we're seeing, the drop between himself and Ligner. Mav Gardner having a fairly decent race up until this point, making a mistake on the exit of No Name and losing places down to 15th place now, but getting told on the close-ups that Konchik maybe does look like he is on slick, so it could just be that Ligner so much better at this portion in the race. Just under 15 minutes left to go, and Konchik under a ton of pressure.
As you can see, Ligner's carrying much more speed through the corners into turn 1 here. Could look for a move to try and make the lead of the race as they head side by side in towards La Source. It's the outside line for Ligner, so he's got to go the whole way around if he can. A long way around for the Audi. And you can see they're looking for a bit of an up and under on the corner. Can he get it done on the exit? You can see there Konchik with a great defence. And here's that. They could be going side by side up towards Rouge and Radion.
Let's see what they can do. Are they going to be brave enough to go for it? Konchik, of course, wanting to keep the net lead, but the racing line going the way of Ligner, who tucks in behind, up over the crest. It's all about exit. Konchik off the road, picking himself up. Of course, the track limits warning, and losing, more importantly, that position to Dominic Ligner, who is now ahead. And that huge advantage that Konchik got thanks to his pit strategy has now gone away. He needs to make sure that Ligner does not get away, because based off his pace, that Audi is going to be running, he's going to be checking out because of how quickly he closed, how easily he was able to dispatch of him. Konchik's he's in a troubled situation here.
Indeed, but Ligner's got to also make sure he doesn't get too overconfident and, you know, send it and try and get the fastest lap by a mile. If he does that, it could definitely ruin his race and it could make him make a mistake. So I think the thing he needs to do is keep that pace he had. His pace was perfect already. Don't push too more. There's no point. You know, it's not worth it. Just stay at the pace you're at now and just keep going and going and going, and that gap will go up more and more. We can see there. Zampieri coming through towards Rouge and Radion, and many drivers still going a little bit wide at Rouge, and obviously after 3 warnings you get your 4th. That's a penalty, and around a circuit like this with only 30 minutes to go, that is not what you want.
It is not one bit. Kazemkinov on the outside and picks his way past the lap car, of course, of the Porsche. He's got sights of Zampieri in that BMW that he would love to go for the AM lead if of course possible. The gap between the pair of them not too drastic, only 1.2 seconds, but only 12 minutes left to go in this race. Tyre pressures in these changeable conditions, of course, it's something that you can change as a base in the setup, but as the tyres heat up, as they cool down, of course, colder tyre temps equal lower pressures, higher tyre temps equal higher tyre pressures. Back raining once again, though, so of course the track's going to cool down. The tyre temps are going to tyre temps and tyre pressures are both going to plummet, so that's going to be probably beneficial for those maybe still on wets if they took that gamble, but I think the majority of people went for slicks. Now the question is, do you pit for 12 minutes or do you tough it out on slicks? It's a long pit stop here at Spa, especially with a tyre change. Are you going to be able to gain that time back in 12 minutes?
It's hard to judge, isn't it? I think It depends on how wet the track goes. If you're losing seconds lap, then go for it. But if you're losing maybe half a second, or you're just little bit more struggling on the rear, I wouldn't bother pitting. I'll just stay as long as you can. Then obviously there is points where it could go absolutely torrential, and then you need to pit. But I think if it stays like this, just keep going along. Try not to get yourself under too much pressure. As we can see, obviously Gromowski looking to gain in on the back of Glanovski as they head up towards Eau Rouge and Radion. And also I think now the drivers need to also make sure they're being careful of battling with the conditions being back to wet and being on slicks. They need to make sure they don't send it into corners like they did before, because the car will not react anywhere near the same as it did.
You've got to, adapt. And adaptation is a key skill. In races like this, it's one that's come to the forefront. We saw, of course, Jeremy Urisin come into the pit lane, Sasha Pal as well, and we knocked them for staying out, but maybe this has worked in their favour. They've still got to tick off their mandatory pit stop. Under normal circumstances, having maybe 3, 4, 5 second gap advantage or lap advantage on fresher wet tyres wouldn't be worth stopping for. But if you're already, say, 45 seconds ahead because you haven't stopped yet, you maybe only have half a pit stop, maybe even less time to catch up in those 10 minutes. It might be worth, maybe not for the win, but for respective class positions, Sasha Pal could well be in a very, very good position here if the rest of the field presumably, well, you'd assume they wouldn't pit, so maybe he's going to be looking very, very quick. It all depends as to how hard this rain comes down and how slippery this track gets.
Indeed, and to be fair, I wasn't surprised to see someone stay out longer. I wasn't surprised to see 2 or 3 stay out longer, because it's those type of conditions. There'll be someone who goes for a gamble, someone who tries to hope for the best of their, for the best of the conditions in their case. And obviously, Paul went for that along with Urison, who had made the pit stop last lap. He now drops down into P9 there, 13 seconds back from his lap. So obviously, Paul into the pits now. We'll see what tyres he goes on to. Obviously, the rain you can see going to be getting progressively worse as the session continues, and that's one of the McLarens. They're making a mistake. That'll be Gramovski getting a little bit slow through and towards Curve de Paul Frag. It's an opening for Gramovski to try and send it up the inside and have the outside at Blanchimont. We'll see these two go side by side. Obviously, the McLaren we know pretty high on downforce, meaning in these wet conditions can take a little bit more speed through the corners than other cars can. As you can see, they still go side by side, and now a little bit of an up and under, as that will be, I think, Glanovski, going off the track as they head down in towards the chicane.
Yeah, Gromowski stays ahead. Glanovski has to give way in the end. Of course, it was an unfortunate mistake. Sasha Pal into the pit lane then. Did he do it in time, is my question.
He did,
of course, 45 seconds ago would have been the close of the pit lane. With it being a long lap, it is always a gamble. I hope that he's got in on time. I didn't quite manage to catch it, but hopefully he came into the pit lane before that pit window mandatory, obviously the pit window ticked down to 0, because if not, he is going to get a big old healthy slap dunk penalty. He has, because obviously it's ticked off as a mandatory stop, which is thankful for him. Where does he rejoin this race in? As it stands, it's P8, but with 8 minutes 45 left to go, presumably maybe about 3 or 4 laps in this race, probably closer to 4, how much time is he going to gain? Is it going to be enough to carve his way through the field? It's going to be tough. He's not going to win this race, but he can certainly give it a go to climb up towards that top 5.
Indeed, I wouldn't say he was on leading pace. I wouldn't say he was on top 5 pace, but I think he's doing, averagely decent. And I think one thing we can see is in wet conditions, any driver can start to make inroads because of those conditions. The track gets to a point where even if you're the quickest in the world, you're not going to be able to beat some of those who are on the better condition tyres. So yes, he might be able to shave off a couple of seconds. He might be able to get a move or two if he can, but definitely nowhere near when you can see already the gap between Koncic and Troy is over 17.5 seconds.
Yeah, and it is a tough gap to close, but as the track conditions back from greasy to damp, it's going to get wetter and wetter. These guys stuck on slicks, they're only going to be getting slower and slower, and the opportunity is that not only on raw pace, but the likelihood of mistakes is also going to increase. And of course, as long as Paul doesn't get greedy and keeps his nose clean, he is going to have a more stable car as such, which means his likelihood of mistakes are going to be a lot lower than those ahead of him. So again, he could probably easily gain 4, 5, maybe even more seconds per lap. The only problem is that clock being so low.
Yeah, indeed, and with it only being 7 minutes to go, it's like, what, 3, 4, 5 laps at back, so, there's a lot of work to do in such little time. You can see already that the gap between, I think, Paul to his lap has come down by, 2 seconds, so the gaps are coming down. So I think maybe he could get past this lot, maybe past right, but any higher than that, I think will definitely be quite a big struggle. We can see, Glanovski looking to make a move yet again. These two, the two McLarens still looking to fight, and no way being made through just yet. But you can see obviously there, Glanovski going a little bit too deep in towards the corner. Not ideal, but obviously, you know, we can still keep position, which is at least a good thing.
And look in the background, that 410 of Sasha Pyle only going to be getting ever closer. James Wright in the 11 McLaren going to the outside, trying to send Glanovski in deep, does exactly that, and that was a silly defence really from the Pyle, which James Wright very quickly nips his way underneath and gets himself ahead up into the top 5, wanting to put as much of a buffer zone between him and potentially Sasha Pyle as possible. He's at the moment 4th in the silver class, but Pyle would maybe want even more a podium, maybe potential on the cards if he's able to play his cards right for the final 6 minutes of this race. Eligner and Konchik 2.4 seconds apart, but in conditions like this, that's not really a lot when you think about it. Of course, their home clear may be essentially to secure P1 and P2 for the pair of them, as long as they don't make any drastic mistakes. Trying to hang on to that podium ahead of Gromovski. Then we've got this fight here, right, doing a good job as to stay ahead, but Glanovski immediately closing that gap back down again.
Indeed, and I think, you know, that's the issue Wright's got. He's got to make sure he can keep himself ahead, because Glanovski, you know, he's got some great pace. He's looking to make the move. So it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a long 5 minutes for Wright, especially when you've got a car behind you. 5 minutes feels a lot longer than it actually is. So Wright's going to be under pressure the whole time. So we just got to keep calm. Don't, you know, get too pressurised. Don't let, obviously, Glanovski gets here. Just stay where you are and just keep it chill. And that's all he can do here at this point. And the only issue he could have is obviously Paul coming in behind as well. You can see Paul looking to gain more and more time. The gap just over 4 seconds. Obviously, it will be under 4 seconds now as they reach towards the next sector. And I think here maybe Paul could look for a P4 here, maybe a P5.
I wouldn't put it past him. It's going to take hard work. It's not going to be handed to him. But yeah, I mean, the cards are there for him. I mean, he's got everything in his arsenal. And this is what we were talking about earlier when it comes to luck. And you said, oh, when it comes to races like this, there is an element of luck. Sasha Pyle, granted, has been given this luck, but he was the one that took the risk to stay out longer to get that luck. Now he's been given this lucky stroke of the timing's gone right for you, the strategy's worked, you're on the right tires at the right time. How is he going to best use this? Because very easily he could bottle this, right it off into the wall, and we'd never would see the best of that lucky scenario. Right now, he needs to take this opportunity with both hands and not let him down. He's got 3 cars lined up for him. That's a top 5 right there. Easy pickings to the inside of the bus stop chicane. He's got to be quite cautious, though, bearing in mind that those on slicks are going to have significantly less grip, but he's making easy work of them. Light work past Urison.
Indeed, I think, you know, I don't think much is going to stop him now as I head down in towards La Source. He's gaining in. You can see in the braking zone he's able to gain a couple of tenths of a second on the car ahead. As we can see that will be Glanovski. They're going a little bit wide on the exit of La Source, and yeah, I can see Paul getting past 2 of these, and maybe the car ahead, which I believe will be, I think it's Glanovski, isn't it, in P4. So maybe it could be a top 4 here for Paul, but he's got to keep calm. He knows he's quicker in pace, but don't get too over ambitious. Obviously, you can see that'll be Glanovski going very wide and losing a lot of time, and that's the last thing you want to do, because if you do that in the wet, it can easily end up with a tyre or, you know, into the barrier.
Got to be so careful. Tread with so much caution. Inside line for Sasha Pyle. It's pointless for Glanovski to defend. Like, just let him go. Don't fight it too hard. I mean, he's going to give it a go to the outside of Lake Com and still fighting with it, but it's pointless. Pyle is on so much better tyres that it's just... why? You're going to be doing neither of yourselves favours, and Pyle is going to get through whether you like it or not. All you're doing is reeling back in his lock to take away overall points for you, and slowing down Pyle and just sort of annoying him as such. There is Elias Troy. He's got Gromovski for company, so this gap went from about 2.5 down to half a second.
Yeah, so we'll see what Paul can do as they obviously get to the last 3 minutes of this race. Obviously, Troy up looking to still defend from Gromovski, who's on some really good pace. We haven't really seen that much for the past couple of, for the past few laps, and he's really got onto the back of Troy. So we could see a podium here for the McLaren. But I think one thing we've seen here, Zach, is in this race, in the wet conditions especially, the McLaren is really, really powerful. As we can see, you there, Zach?
Mate, I had a nightmare there. No, that's my bad. That is absolutely my bad. I'm going to add that to my own Google Doc for this race, because, yeah, I muted myself, because usually I mute, but then when I went to unmute, I muted myself because I hadn't muted. So, yeah, that's a skill issue on my part. I do apologise. But, yeah, the McLaren looking very, very strong indeed, and that's why the majority of the field has taken to it for this season. We are about to head ourselves onto what I believe is the penultimate lap of this race. The outside line goes the way of course, Sasha Pal, but Gromovski sending the move on the last try. They run themselves in deep. Of course, Sasha Pal going to be able to be beneficiary of it, but no, a little bit of contact between the two McLarens. Thankfully, Pal able to clear them. That was always risky business, and an awkward send nonetheless, I think, from Gromovski.
Indeed, and I think we can kind of confirm the top three being Aligna, Konchik and Paul, but there behind the still battles obviously between Troyer and Gromovski. Obviously, Wright also looking to gain in these last few minutes of this race. So yeah, I think, you know, Aligna's drove perfect. You know, once he got past Konchik, there was nothing stopping. That cat went up and up and up. It's not really grown over these past couple of laps, but it stayed at a consistent point where he hasn't got to worry about Konchik coming back in the last lap or two. Obviously, Parley's got a massive gap further back. He doesn't, you know, he knows he's not going to gain it on the top two, but he knows he's quicker than, you know, fourth and fifth, as we can see Gromovski looking to make a move in towards Lacombe. He's going to try and pull to the outside, and it's a bit of a risky move, but he's got to make it now here, hasn't he, Zach?
He has. It's do or die. A minute left on the clock. In goes deep. Elias Troy off the road once again. And that's a theme that we're starting to see in conditions like this. He rejoins ahead of Gromovski, who, of course, is not going to be very happy as to how that's happened. Track now fully wet. Those on slicks are going to be sliding around like there's no tomorrow. Outside line from Gromovski, trying to balance the car. Doesn't quite work out for him. But this is a really good battle here for second place. And the Silvers, but oh no, it's not, because Elias Troy is sent round.
Oh, and he's going to come close to contact with Wright there as they head through, and that is not ideal. It is very sad for, isn't it, for Troy, but we know in these conditions someone's going to come out in the underhand. We can see there Wright defending heavily, and they make a bit of contact into P1. Whew, that could have been a lot worse than it did. Yeah,
definitely so. James Wright etching himself ahead into fifth place, and of course Troy not going to be too happy as to how things went just then. He's got Hislop just behind him as well. Also, I believe a bit of lap traffic in the form of that McLaren into the Piff Paff chicane. No way through for now. The timer has ticked 0, so I believe we are on to the final lap of this race. Dominic Aligna may be able to take victory. However, it's Damien Konchik that's coming up as the race leader. What has happened to Dominic Aligna? I want to know. Damien Konchik then has been the more consistent party in this third round of the season. He's going to come across the line in spectacular and unbeknownst fashion to us to take victory here in Spa, crawling his way across the line, potentially low on fuel. Crosses the line victorious for the second time this season. Round number 3 here at Spa goes the way of Konchik. Aligna miles behind in second. Sasha Pal, of course, here in third with a great way to win in the Silvers. Come out of absolutely nowhere to take third place overall, but second place on the road, in fact. Dominic Aligna, what has happened?
What? I don't have a clue. There must be an issue somewhere, mustn't there? He was on the lead lap, he was leading right, but there must be some sort of game issue there because it's saying he's a lap down. What has happened here?
I have to be honest, I've never seen that before, and it completely baffled me. Nonetheless, Konchik has been able to be the beneficiary of that, win this race, and take another stride forward in the championship. Of course, however this result stands, it would presumably be Aligna's drop round, so he effectively finishes third for this race, but that's still points lost to Damien Konchik. Morris Kazemkanov will, of course, take second place in the AM class. Sampieri will be the winner of it in 12th overall. What a peculiar end to the race that we had here. What seemed to be so dominant for Dominic Aligna to take, of course, the second win in Spa, the second time of asking in wet conditions, has now turned itself into be potentially a championship disaster.
Yeah, but, well, I'm sure if there's an issue, you know, it should be able to be overturned, possibly depending where he finished on track. Because I do remember Konchik crossing the line first, but Aligna, you know, he's dropped into 14th. I don't think he finished that far back, Zach. So, yeah, that's a very odd one, and yeah, it's going to definitely be picking our brains for the next few days until we find out what the actual issue is there for Aligna.
Theory has come into the YouTube chat that he was given a drive-through and didn't serve it, and then, of course, got the time penalty for it. I don't remember seeing that drive-through pop up, and also, even if he was given a drive-through penalty, it would still come up with a checkered flag next to his name on the timing tower, insinuating that he's finished the race. He still technically hasn't finished this race. So, how has this happened?
Well, is that a question for the devs? Because I don't have a clue what's happened here. He's disappeared. I think he might have left the lobby now, but yeah, and hopefully it can, you know, hopefully the issues can be sorted out there for him indeed. But yeah, it's a big shame for Aligna, and definitely not what he would have hoped and not what anyone would have expected to come out at the end of this race. It's been quite a chaotic one, but we've had also quite a chaotic and confusing ending here.
We have, what a weird way to obviously round off the first half of Season 7. Of course, we'll run you through the full grid order as and when we can. I don't think that's going to be quite available to us due to the amount of people leaving the session, but I can tell you for free that it was Damien Konchik that in the end took the victory. Sasha Pal winning in the silvers in second place overall, thanks to a superb strategy. He played that race essentially to perfection, right? I mean, yeah, he got lucky, but he did the best job with the luck that he was given, and he drove the final 12 minutes of that race superbly.
Yeah, definitely. I think in this race, obviously in everyone's own respective rights, I think a lot of people drove brilliant, and obviously, the likes of Troyer. I think he was also one of those you could say was probably one of the best five, but obviously he made a mistake and spun round.
Well, there you go then, ladies and gentlemen, the final classification for round 3 of the sim racing, the PC GT3 Series. Damien Konchik extends the gap at the front with another victory and a fastest lap here in Spa. Sasha Pal and, of course, Jakub Gromowski will join him on the podium, ahead of James Wright, who rounds off the silver podium in 4th overall. Josh Hislop's just in behind in 5th, ahead of Elias Troy, who in the end narrowly finished ahead of Glonowski, only 1/1000th of a second between the pair of them. Jeremy Urison, Marcel Hessen, Luca Raya round off the top 10, ahead of Bandera and Zampieri. Kazimkanov in 13th, ahead of Patricio Gameo and Paulo Cisco that round off the top 15. Then comes Miller and Aligna down in 17th place at the end of this race. Of course, an investigation will be going into what happened with Aligna. Maybe it was ping or client server issues or anything like that. We don't know what his situation will be for this race. Chances are it will just be a write-off. So effectively treat this as Aligna finishing 3rd, I guess, kind of. His drop round will now be 17th, which means he cannot make a single mistake for the rest of the season to come. Nieto, Blanchette, Gardner and Parry round off the 21-car field. And that's the interesting thing here, Nathan. Aligna, if this result stands, has to be faultless from here to the end of the season.
Indeed, I think if this is the case, I think he might lose a championship because Konchik, from what I saw, he's either been 1st or 2nd. Nowhere else. He's looked really strong the whole way through. So, yeah, I think if this result stands, the Aligna could definitely be out of this championship fight, or at least very close to being out of it.
Yeah, completely agree. It is going to be a very, very tough one for the Season 4 champion to fight back from. But if anyone can do it, it will be him. Ladies and gentlemen, that is unfortunately going to have to wrap up our action for round number 3 of Season 7. It was a wild ride all the way through this race, and of course we continue our voyage around the globe in terms of Season 7. We've ticked off round 3 here at Spa. In a week's time we'll go to our reversed grid race in Silverstone. It won't be 2 separate races, but it will be reverse championship order as we battle our way around 40 minutes of the home of British motorsport before we take to the final 2 rounds of Bathurst and the Nürburgring. My name has been Zach Sweeney. I've had the beautiful man of Nathan Richards alongside me in the commentary booth with Kieran Sharp, the lesser beautiful man behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, making the broadcast look very nice and pretty. Thank you to everyone, of course, for watching. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, it's goodbye for now.